I have loved you, even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you may be filled with joy. Yes, your joy may overflow. This is my commandment. Love one another in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask using my name. This is my command. Love one another. Please be seated. So Memorial Day is about remembering. It's about holding in a place that cannot get away from us. About memory. Now, I don't know about you, but every now and then I forget someone's name. And I notice it's happening a little more now than it was before. Anyone else have this trouble? I'm glad I thought I was the only one, but Ralph Waldo Emerson, as he became full of years, he talked about the fact that he was having trouble remembering names and remembering things. He called it his naughty memory, and he couldn't remember the name of a plow, and so he was trying to communicate something about the use of a plow, and so he said that implement that is used to cultivate a field. He just couldn't remember plow. He could remember that other stuff. So you see, we can take this as an occasion to sound really intelligent, to sound like Ralph Waldo Emerson if we're having a little bit of difficulty. But memory, it just seems that our whole culture is beginning to lose a sense of memory. Just a year ago, David McCullough, the great author, historian, and television host, spoke with the Forum Club. And he shared the fact that many colleges and universities are dropping history from their curriculum, perhaps in favor of all of this tech stuff. And he bemoaned the fact that we're losing a sense of history. He was just about to come out with his latest book on the Wright brothers. And these magnificent young men who developed a sense of calling, and with that sense of calling, of course, as we know, built the first airplane, the first heavier-than-air form of flight. But when we forget, when we lose our sense of memory, it sets us up for a form of narcissism, as if it all begins with us, as if somehow we're smarter than all the people that have gone before us. It's what G.K. Chesterton called the arrogance of those who happen to be walking about. Those of us who happen to be walking about, unless we remember, unless we maintain that vibrant memory of those who've gone before us and have a profound respect for what they have done to bring us thus far, we settle into a self-oriented, me first, me only way of life that is not pretty. Samuel, as he was leading the people, and he went up against the Philistines, and the Philistines were so much more powerful than the people of God, and yet God sent a lightning storm right down on the top of the Philistines, and the Hebrew people that went running after them, and they routed the Philistines. The Philistines ran for their lives, and when everyone was tired, they stopped, and Samuel set up a stone of remembrance called the Ebenezer. That's where that word comes from. And he said, thus far has God brought us. And he set it up as a memorial, as a way of remembering. Likewise, when the people of God crossed the Jordan River into the promised land, in the middle of the Jordan, they set up stones as memorials so that they would remember how God had acted in their lives. We must remember. We must maintain a vibrant sense of memory that keeps us humble. We're so touched by that first reading, the writing on the back of those photographs that young soldier had written to his parents. And he died about 2 weeks later, and he never did see his parents again. And how many soldiers who were out on the front lines of battle have written those kinds of letters to their loved ones back home? And at the time of the Bulge, at the Battle of the Bulge, the soldiers there on the ground were told that they were not to expect to ever go home, that this would be their last Christmas. And yet they served. They continued on. And our failure to remember that manner of sacrifice, of self-sacrifice, of giving, our failure to remember hurts. It cheapens, it lessens, it thins out us as a people. I had the privilege of presiding over the service of Jack Sims, who was one of the Doolittle Raiders. He was second off the deck after Jimmy Doolittle in the Doolittle Raid in 1942, just a few months after the strike on Pearl Harbor. It was a symbolic action, but it was an action in which those young men flew off the deck of that aircraft carrier and had no expectation of returning. Well, Jack Sims, when I was at the graveside, I showed up a little bit early, and there were some young Air Force cadets to perform a 21-gun salute. And I went over to them and I called them over and I said, you know, this that we're recognizing today, this one that we're honoring today, was one of the Doolittle Raiders. And they said, what's that? What is that? So I said, well, you got to just go watch the movie Pearl Harbor. Watch the movie. A loss of memory. And one of the great actions of of American soldiers, and I do believe that's not a Freudian slip, of God's action in their hearts to move forward and to protect a people against the onslaught of true evil in our world. And that's the moral conundrum that we face. Jesus, when he was with his disciples on that night, soon before he died, was referencing himself. Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Greater love is not seen except when one lays down his or her life. And in so reminding this to his disciples and calling forth that awareness, he then went forth and laid down his life as an example to them. But what then do we do with the reality of warfare? What then do we do with the realities of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus, in his calling upon us to be a loving people, says we're to love our enemies? How do we do that? How does this work? How does a Christian enter in and participate in such activity. The problem comes in, and it came in for the early church in the 5th century, when Attila the Hun and the Huns came pillaging through the eastern stretches of the Roman Empire, and Christian peoples were being overrun. Innocent men, women, and children were being slaughtered by the Hun hordes. And as they approached, at this time now, the church had become the dominant religion in the Roman Empire. And so the Christianity had sort of allied itself with world power. What now does a Christian do in relation to an attacking army? What does a Christian do in the face of an attacking horde who is doing great evil? What is a Christian response when airlines crash into the World Trade Center? Those are lawyers, not lieutenants. Those are janitors, not generals. This is not an act of military strike. It was an act against a people. What does a Christian do in the face of the unleashing of evil? Drawing upon the thought of Thomas Aquinas and Augustine as they began to articulate what the response of Christian people was to be, Aquinas, in his chapter on love, in his treatise on love, unpacks what is called the just war doctrine. Within the context of love, we act to defend the hopeless, the helpless, the weak. An act of love is that which defends those who are being attacked or put at risk or in danger because of the unleashing of evil. And so, as an act of love, we respond when a nation with a legitimate cause and with a legitimate exercise of a magistrate and the magistrate's authority moves a people to war. And then the stories become so very personal. Then it's the story of individual men and women in harm's way, fearing for their lives and doing everything they can to simply go home. They are there to protect freedom, and their one desire is to get it over with and come home. The American people have never been a people of conquest. We're not a people that goes and fights and keeps that territory. We're not about expanding our territory. We're a people simply to maintain peace. And so our soldiers, men and women, go. And they act. And in so acting, within a particular set of contexts that constitute the unleashing of just war, they act with godly protection. And greater love is on display. The greatest love is on display when they are there, their own lives at stake, when they give and they sacrifice. Private First Class James Anderson had just turned 29. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty as a rifleman, 2nd Platoon, Company F, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, 3rd Marine Division in Vietnam on 28 February 1967. He had just turned 20. Just turned 20. Company F was advancing in a dense jungle northwest of Cam Lo in an effort to extract a heavily besieged reconnaissance patrol. Private First Class Anderson's platoon was the lead element and had advanced only about 200 meters when they were brought under extremely intense enemy small arms and automatic weapons fire. The platoon reacted swiftly, getting on line as best they could in the thick terrain, and began returning fire. Private First Class Anderson found himself tightly bunched together with the other members of the platoon, only 20 meters from the enemy positions. As the firefight continued, several of the men were wounded by the deadly enemy assault. Suddenly, an enemy grenade landed in the midst of the Marines and rolled alongside Private First Class Anderson's head. Without hesitating, and with complete disregard for his own personal safety, he reached out, grabbed the grenade, pulled it close to his chest, and curled around it as it went off. Although several Marines received shrapnel from the grenade, his body absorbed the major force of the explosion. In this singularly heroic act, Private First Class Anderson saved his comrades from serious injury and possible death. His personal heroism, extraordinary valor, and inspirational supreme self-sacrifice reflected great credit upon himself and the Marine Corps and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. He gallantly gave his life for his country. Received the Medal of Honor, the first African American to receive the Medal of Honor, who gave his life at a time in 1967 with all of those racial tensions, but there in his platoon were white guys and black guys and Hispanic guys, and he gave his life for his friends. And what must we do? But remember, it is not required of us that we go to such extent that we pay with that last full measure of devotion. But it constitutes a standard that we carry with us in all of our relations with others. That we are always willing. We're always willing to sacrifice on behalf of the other. That we as God's people are always willing to give beyond that which we ever anticipated in giving. And thereby, we demonstrate what it means to be a child of God. Will you join me in prayer? And our Father, keep our memories alive with the most important things, the substantive realities of those who've gone before us and preserved for us a way of life that allows us and enables us to live likewise in a manner that evidences your power and your peace and your love within us. We thank you in the name of Jesus, who gave his life for us.